Hello and welcome to the channel. This is Dan from DS Design Woodworking. Today's video is going to be the assembly and testing of a Fox W1668 drill press. My need for a new drill press was driven by wanting to spin a 3.5-inch Forstner bit like this one to drill out some large wood blanks to make wine bottle holders. I went through everything I could find to look at, looking for decent horsepower, decent price, and low RPM was critical for this drill bit. I was hoping for 200. I settled on the Fox that goes down to 250. It's about as low as I could find. A lot of them start at 500 as a minimum RPM, so if you're shopping, make sure that you know what you're getting, or that's going to match your specs. This one also doubles as a spindle sander. It has an oscillating feature, so I had looked at adding a spindle sander to the shop also, and this is going to give me both in one. So as I get started here, I snipped a little bit too much, so one box is open, it has the head unit and some auxiliary things like the handles and the chuck. Both boxes are manageable by one person. Total weight's about 130 pounds, but the way it's broken down, it's definitely manageable. And while I'm unboxing here, I just want to say, make sure you give your local store a chance when you're looking around. I figured I'd be buying online, but my local Thomas tool had a price of $3.79 when Amazon was $4.29, so make sure you stop by the little guys before buying at the big box giants, especially the online retailers. So the second box has the base plate, the column, the table, the mount for the table. We'll get everything spread out, get it all ready. You're going to need a 16mm wrench and also a Phillips screwdriver. Not much involved in the assembly. First step is just simply to mount the column. That's 4 bolts, 16mm wrench, get them tightened down. Next up comes mounting the dust collection port to the bottom of the table. There's 2 halves to it that look to be identical, so orientation doesn't matter. 4 screws that go in. And I had thought that there would be a bottom to the underneath the spindle, but it's open for where the spindle comes through, so it doesn't quite create a vacuum, but it should still catch any falling dust. I might modify that in the future to actually create a vacuum there. From there, you're going to get the table bracket, and there's a pinion gear that needs to be installed inside the bracket. There's a rack on the column and a pinion that gets driven here that runs the table up and down. So it's simple to slide it in so it protrudes, and there's a crank that's going to go on there. Find this flat spot on the shaft, make sure the set screw is lined up with the flat, and then get it tightened down. So before you tighten it, make sure that the pinion is fully seated in there. I noticed I had some play, and so I loosened it and then reseated it fully and then tighten it down again. Don't over tighten with these little Allen wrenches. The column had the rack pre-installed. The portion of the rack that has the longer flat spot is supposed to go up. Mine was upside down, so I'm flipping it. And the rack seats against the pinion, and then both slide down over the column. The bottom taper will fit right in the base, and the collar has a taper on one side also that's going to capture the top of the rack. And both of them will be able to rotate around the column as you swing the table around. The table goes on next. And then the head unit itself isn't that hard to deal with. It's a little heavy. I think they probably recommend 2 people, but not a problem for one person to lift it up there if you have a good lifting position. They give you some directions to align it with a plumb bob, but I didn't find it to be something critical. You're going to align the table with the drill bit when you use it, the center of the table in most cases, so I just eyeballed it as straight. I can't see where it would make a difference. 2 set screws secure the head to the column. And then from there, there's some cleanup time because all these metal parts are packed in plastic that has oil on them to prevent rust during shipping and I'm sure a long trip from overseas. So take some time to clean all the oil off the surfaces. You definitely don't want to have it getting onto your wood that you're going to be putting on here. Here's a spot where the directions were wrong. The next stop was to install the chuck, and after putting the handles in, you'll see that I found out that there's a shield that goes over the chuck and it needs to go on first. The directions had the steps in the wrong order, so it won't slide over the chuck once it's on there. Here, we'll see that in just a second here. I looked at it to see if it could be spread or anything, but it's a stiff plastic. I wouldn't try to spread it. So after removing the chuck, I'll get this installed, do it in the right order, and then we'll get the chuck slid back on there. There's a draw screw in the middle of the chuck that pulls it up onto the taper. You don't want to over tighten that, just like everything else. It's the tapered fit that actually provides all the traction. And second time's the charm. A box end wrench can make a nice little extension on an Allen. A smaller one would have worked a lot better. I had the 16 sitting here, which is barely big enough to grab. Up top there's a knob to install on the cover, and inside the cover you can see the auxiliary belt there that's going to run the oscillating function when we're sanding. And to do some extra cleanup here because whoever greased the pulley in the front gobbed it inside and got it on the belt. You definitely don't want the grease on the belt for traction. So when you want oscillation, you slip this on. It drives a little rack and pinion up there and moves the head up and down. And then when you're done, just store it back inside the cover. Need a little adjustment for the knob. First it didn't latch at all. And then a little more cleanup on these are the insert plates for the sanding hole in the table. So depending on the size of the spindle that you're using, you can change out which is the best fit. And here I'm just showing the wrench that came with it that adjusts the tilt of the table, which I'm not going to do right now because it should be nice and hopefully perpendicular from the factory. A set screw here to hold the tension. Once you've got the motor pulled back to the proper amount of tension, they call for 1.5 inches in between the belts when you squeeze. I had a little trouble here. It bottomed out to start with, which didn't allow me to relieve tension in order to move the belts very easily. You should be able to get a little more slack in order to get the belts off, so it was quite a chore to walk the belts around and get them moved on the pulleys. Since I'm going to try out my 3.5 inch drill bit, I wanted to get to the slowest speed possible, which was a complete reversal of the belts, and it takes a little bit of doing. Hopefully I won't use the drill press a lot just for drilling, and hopefully I won't have to be changing the belts too often because I had the advantage of standing up on the table right now, but when you're next to the drill press and reaching up, it's going to be a little more work yet. And as I finally get the belts back on there, ready for a test. Everything's running smoothly. And let's get a real test on it. Hey, drill press drills. Now for the one that I'm more curious about. This bit wasn't very sharp when I bought it, so it's drilling into soft pine, but it was actually loading up a little bit on the cutting edges. You can even see it in the super slow-mo here, that there's fibers building up on the cutting edge, so I'm going to need to do some work on this bit to make it more usable. Sanding kit that comes has three drum sizes in it. Here's a pair of washers for each one. The ones that came in the sanding kit were a better match at the proper number. So one top and one bottom, so when you put it on the mandrel here and draw it down with a nut, it expands the rubber center and locks the sleeve in place. And then just change out as you see fit, of course, for different sizes. I'm probably going to get a bigger drum also to go on there. That will have to stay above the table instead of going down through it. And that'll require an auxiliary table that has a hole in it that the drum can dip into without hitting the metal table. The largest size here didn't end up needing an insert. I figured the largest insert was the one, but run it without one. And let's check out the oscillation feature.
Not much of a demonstration since I have the RPM really low. It's going to have to be changed back for sanding, but everything's working as it should. The oscillation works. Dust collection is going to do its job, I believe. That's it for putting it together, testing it out. Next step is to make the stand for it, and I'll be starting another video on that just right away here. Now that I have it together, I can verify some dimensions on the height I want off the floor. I want to maintain a nice comfortable working height for sanding. If you're only going to use it a little bit as a drill press, you could get away with a taller stand if you wanted more storage. But since this is a dual purpose and you might spend some extended time sanding, this needs to be down here at a comfortable working height. So the dimensions of my cart for it will be based on where I want this to end up. So I'll get started on that very soon here, and until then, thanks for watching.